How you going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I'm back working on the Jeep, changing the front and rear rotors. So first of all, what I'll do is I'll loosen off the wheel nuts prior to lifting the vehicle in the air. Okay, the tools and materials that we require to carry out this job are a socket drill driver, a socket set and a ratchet, a master bar, a torque wrench, a hammer and punch, a rag, and then also some brake cleaner, some high temperature anti-seize grease, and some rubber grease if we require it on any of the rubber boots. We'll get the car up in the air now and proceed to remove all the wheels, then we'll closely inspect everything prior to starting the job. Right, first of all, what we'll do is we'll unscrew these lug nuts here and remove the wheel, and then that will give us access into the brake rotors and the calipers. Okay, what I'll do is I'll start by taking out this bolt here that runs all the way through the hardware, which holds the brake pads in position. There's also two pins here. They need to be drifted out from the front to the rear of the car and towards the engine. And then after that we'll pull out the brake pads and then we'll remove these two 21mm bolts here. Right, so what we'll do is we'll use the hammer and the punch and we'll drift the two pins on the brake calipers from the front to the back, so in towards the engine. What I'll do now is I'll just use the grips, grab a hold of the pin and then just tap it gently with the hammer. And that's the pin there. That's your hardware. So we'll give everything a clean, grease this up prior to replacing them. Right, one more thing I'd like to point out is that we'll need to remove this speed sensor on the hub, just so that it's, because the cable's a bit tight here. And when we remove this caliper, it's just going to put too much strain on this and I don't want to damage it. So I'll remove the speed sensor and then I'll proceed to remove the caliper, and then what I'll do is I'll hang it up on this bungee cord, and then that way there's not going to be any stress on this hydraulic hose here for the brakes. So we'll remove the speed sensor, which is a 10mm, and that just pulls out of the way. We'll also give that a clean prior to reinstalling it. Bolts here, which hold on the caliper. So we'll remove these. Now if these are very tight, you might have to use a breaker bar. So we'll get this off now. Right, as you can see, what I've done is I've put the bungee cord through the caliper, and then that hooks onto the spring at the top here. Now that way, that'll keep the caliper safe and it won't put any stress or duress on the hydraulic hose here. And then what we'll do now is we'll remove this disc. Now inside this disc rotor here, there's a little rubber. So what we'll need to do is pick that rubber out of here and then that will allow us to remove the rotor. So to remove the rubber ring on the rotor, all I'm going to do is use this pick and then just pick it out like so. There we go. Right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use some of the good old WD-40, spray it all around where the ring was, and hopefully give it a few minutes, let it penetrate, and then we'll proceed to remove the rotor. Okay, now that we've let the WD-40 penetrate the rusted and corroded parts, we're now going to use a soft mallet, and we're going to spin the rotor and hit it from the inside to the outside, and hopefully that will loosen it off. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of built up corrosion around the hub here, so it's imperative that we clean this off and get rid of any dirt and debris. Otherwise, if we put the rotor on, any imperfections there will make the rotor wobble as the wheel rotates. So we'll get this cleaned up. So I'm going to use a combination of an old rag, possibly the wire brush, but the tool that I really like to use is just the drill with a little wire brush attachment on the end of it. So first of all, what I'll do is I'll just clean up the area as best I can with the rag. And then I'll go around it all with the drill. One of the most important things when you're fitting any replacement parts is to make sure that the replacement part is a like for like part. So all I'll do is just quickly compare. And as you can see, it's definitely the right part. So we'll get the new part installed now. So what I'm going to do is just put one of the, I'm just going to put one of the lug nuts, thread it all the way in, just to hold the disc in position, hold the rotor in position. All I'm going to do now is fit the rubber O-ring back onto the rotor, push that all the way home, and then that way it will hold the disc in position until I fit the wheel. And now it's just a case of refitting the caliper, the brake pads and all the bolts as required. Now what we'll do is we'll just put some high temperature grease on the back of the pads, and I'll just stop any squeaking. We've got the hardware here, as you can see. I've cleaned them up. So this small end here goes to the top, goes to the bottom, and then the pins come from the rear, and the point end comes out towards the front of the car. So we'll get these fitted now. And then last but not least, the middle pin. Now what we'll do is we'll give the rotor, front and rear, a good clean with brake cleaner and clean all of the caliper as well. Because it's imperative that we don't have any grease or anything like that on the rotors, because it's going to stop the car from braking correctly. And as you can see, they've got quite dirty during the installation process. There you go, that's the brake rotor installed, and I must admit it looks rather nice, and I do reckon that this rotor will give the car an extra 25 brake horsepower. One thing to point out, this is like a coating that's actually on the rotors. Now what that will do is that will allow the brake pads and the rotors to bind in together. And then after it wears off, it will go to the colour of a normal disc, like a metallic colour, rather than this silver. Now it's time to remove the nut from the rotor and replace the wheel and tighten everything up. And I'm just checking for any grinding here. And what we'll do now is we'll move on to the rear. So I start here again by simply removing the lug nuts from the wheel. On the rear brake caliper, we've got the two small pins that we need to drift from the front to the back of the vehicle. That's what holds in the brake pads. There isn't a bolt in the centre here this time. There also isn't the speed sensor attached to the hydraulic brake line. And then all we've got at the back is two 18mm bolts that hold the caliper onto the rear hub assembly here. So we'll get these two pins out, pull the two bolts out of the back, strap this up, and then we'll be good to start to removing the rear rotor. So a quick hammer of the pins, that removes them very easily. All I'm doing here is removing the two 18mm bolts that hold on the caliper to the hub assembly. And the same again, I will now remove the caliper from the hub, and then I'll place the bungee cord through the caliper and then tie that onto the spring assembly above. Now I'm removing the rubber O-ring, giving it a final spray with WD-40, hitting the rotor with the mallet and removing it as required. So as you can see here, this is a different setup. You've got your brake caliper which presses on the rotor here to stop your vehicle, but also when you apply the handbrake, it's a drum brake setup. So when you push on your foot pedal handbrake, these actually push out, and then they push onto this part here, the drum part of the rotor. It's a case of now just refitting the rotor, undoing the strap and rebolting the caliper and fitting the brake pads, then the wheel. you can see, it really looks the part. That's it guys, thanks very much for watching, take care.